For taking your afternoon. We're going to jump right to the fun and exciting stuff here. The Hacker Architecture team is here today to start discussing design options for the library itself. And so when we're doing comments at the end and questions and stuff, if you could please come up here to the microphone and speak right into it so that people, because we have some people online who are also attending and want to make sure they can hear too. Okay, thank you. Well, take it away.
Hi everyone. My name is Carrie Wolf. I'm the project architect with Hacker Architects. Next to me I have Peng and Nick, who are part of our
in progress.
who are part of our architectural team, and then I will let David and Charlie introduce themselves and we'll get this thing rolling.
Hi, everybody. I'm David Keltner with Hacker Architects, coming to you today from the fishbowl of City Council.
Hello, folks. I'm Charlie Brooker, landscape architect with Place.
Let's get this thing rolling. Of course, my clicker stops working right when we really start the presentation. Here's the agenda of what we're going to go through today. We're working through our project goals, criteria and priorities, schedule overview, program updates, our emergency preparedness plan, site considerations, design considerations, and you'll see a lot of those options, landscape opportunities, and a chance for Q&A at the end. Some of this, if you've been here during our other community events, will be a little bit more familiar to you, but we want to make sure that we're reintroducing them and tracking them accordingly to make sure that all of your comments are heard and recorded and incorporated into the design. So here are the project goals. These are sort of the goals that were given to us from the city and sort of the steering committee team that we've been tracking. The first goal is economic solutions to well-documented needs for programming space, collection for growth, technology, children and public meeting spaces, complementing existing and adjacent developments, connecting the new facilities to the park and that whole experience. How can we incorporate sustainability in a cost-effective way into the design? Recognize and incorporate the climate, natural landscape, character, and values of Coos Bay, and plan and design the library so it serves as a disaster response, resource, and recovery center after a natural disaster. And we'll sort of go into a little bit more of how those criteria and goals are coming to life and fruition in the project. Here are a few of the priorities. Project costs. We really want to make sure we have an efficient building, humble in its design and approach, but also really, handles all the needs of the library. Park sensitivity. We want to make sure that the park experience and the library experience are congruous in this whole experience of the park. We want to use the shared use of the site. We have a kayak launch, we have the wonderful lakes, the trails, and now adding a library to give a new life to the park during different times of the day. We want to incorporate sustainability. How can we make this building energy efficient, have healthy materials, have a lot of natural daylight, make it water efficient and all electric so we can look towards resiliency in its systems for the future. A whole nother element is the resiliency and safety of it and making it a robust enough building that it'll survive after a natural disaster and be a resource to the community in that event. And then just the library program in itself, it wants to be innovative, have a bunch of the community spaces and functions, welcoming to everyone, and be a safe space for all. And design, which is really our main goal as designers, we want it to reflect the community and values of Coos Bay. It wants to be beautiful, so it's maintained throughout its entire lifespan of the building, enhance the park surrounding, and be flexible for the future. Here is sort of the overall schedule. You can see the "We Are Here" sign on the bottom. We're in this sort of very early stages of design, so some of the stuff might look a little bit more real. It certainly isn't part of that. You can see here we also have a couple of more outreach events scheduled later along the design. I believe there's 2 more left in this phase, and we're right in the middle. The sort of schematic design phase links into this phase 1, this yellow one. we'll pause for a little bit as the funding strategies and the bond get passed and, build momentum for the project, and then really look to the future for the rest of the construction and design documents to get built. So we're looking at a pretty 1.5 year timeline after this first initial phase. One thing I wanted to point out was that we are working on incorporating meetings with the Confederated Tribes. I know that during the last community meeting, we had a lot of comments about why we weren't working with the tribes initially, and we have really done our due diligence to meet with them and sort of make our way in those relationships with the tribal council and integrate them into this overall project experience. Here's sort of our program update or breakdown. We're looking at a 31,500 square foot building. You can see here all of those little areas in there just point to different meeting rooms, our Friends of the Library bookstore, all the things that we need just for a library to function, a bunch of other offices and staff space, and really give them what they need to make this a successful library. And here on the right, you'll see a bunch of different colors, and these will be what's reflected on the floor plans and representative of the total area of each sort of program. And one thing we also wanted to point out is this sort of back of house space might not, it doesn't match the support area language. So we just want to make sure that as we're working through this and you guys see it and we talk through the building, that's not foreign. Another opportunity that we are excited to investigate is this idea of emergency preparedness. And here's sort of a rough list that we are coming up with to help us during or after a natural disaster. And it's looking at a diesel generator, battery and on-site storage. That way we can plug in electronics and all of the electricity will be functioning. We'll have some sort of information board so that people can come here, know where to look for information, get point to, or find people, and a lot of storage space. In the event of a natural disaster, we want to make sure we have sleeping cots, beddings, supplies, food, water, rations, and all that good stuff. Site considerations. So this is where we were last community meeting. If some of you have come to those, we were looking at 3 potential sites throughout Talbots Park. Site A, the Bluff, Site B, the Clearing, and Site C, the Ridge. If you can see by the overwhelming hearts for that site, that's really where we landed and what we moved forward with in terms of these 3 designs. Here are the comments that we have been tracking, and then we want to make sure that we just keep reiterating on each time we present. The Site C provided us with high visibility from the park entry. It had close proximity to current amenities, really great expansive views of the lake, shared parking opportunities with what's already existing on site, the most minimal impact to existing wetlands, great access to daylight and solar energy, close pedestrian access, and good soils. Some other comments that were on the boards that might not be on these site boards were loving the idea of this sort of shared technology and community spaces, making sure that's forefront in the design. Like the idea of being able to have your coffee in a killer view. We want this building to be humble, attractive, comfortable, and cozy, really welcoming in its arrival. We wanted to work with local tribes for all the cultural connections to interior and exterior experiences and improve upon the existing parking infrastructure to incorporate overflow or how to deal with parking at night. So I'm going to go through a couple of the diagrams just relevant to the site ridge itself. We have a couple of known wetlands on the site, these sort of browner areas. And we're currently researching and working towards seeing if there's another potential wetland that we can see visually on site, but it might not be delineated. And these are sort of driving where the building's laying out on the site because we don't want to impact these as much as possible. Here are some of the existing setbacks. We really want to protect the riparian buffer along that lake shore to make sure that it has the right ecology to survive. And then we also have a sort of small little 10-foot setback from the property line. Here's a little diagram showing the views. We have a bunch of filtered views on the west side of the ridge, overlooking through these trees, it's really immersed in the park experience. And then we have these wonderful lake expansive views towards the east side of the project. Being perched up on the hill, it allows us to really take advantage of those opportunities. Parking. So this is a sort of the overall parking on the site. There's about 116 existing spaces. That includes the sort of what I've been calling the onion, the not technical term for parking on that side, the onion next to the Bright Learning Center. We have some along the top of the ridge that we are proposing, and then moving or shifting around or expanding the one that's currently on the lake to accommodate roughly 165 spaces total, which is roughly what is needed per zoning code. And then traffic. We know that access to the park can be a little bit difficult right now. We wanted to just make sure that we say it out loud today that we are currently using a traffic engineer to study this, and we're hoping to have results soon on how can we improve this intersection to make it safe for everyone coming in and out of the park. I'm going to hand it over to David here to walk you through the design.
Okay, great. Oh, it worked. Okay. Today is really exciting because we're going to start sharing for the first time with all of you what the library might look like and how it might be shaped and how it can fit onto the site. And there are some common things that we were thinking about for all of the options that we're going to show to you today. Starting with the natural surroundings and wanting to make sure this library really makes the most of its position in the park and really integrates with the climate of Coos Bay. So some of the things that we're looking at starting from left to right on this page is really looking at the views that we have to the lake and understanding that they're not all equal. We recognize that actually looking a little bit northeast across the lake is very pristine. You don't see any other buildings, you just see nature. And so we were trying to find ways to get our building to help kind of open up a little bit to the northeast. We were looking at the slope of the site. So the selected site does have about a 15 or 16 foot change in elevation from the top of the ridge. We call it the ridge with all the trees on it, from the top of the ridge down to where the lake is. Oh yeah,
I'm just going to adjust your screen.
Oh, thanks, Charlie.
So we can see you.
Hybrid. Okay. So the slope is about 15 or 16 feet, which is about 1 story in a library. And so what's really great about that is that the ground floor of our building can open up at the lake level, and the second floor of the building aligns perfectly with where the top of that ridge is, which means both of them can have, you can drive up to both levels and enter. So we're working with that. And then we're also recognizing that around the site that we actually have a really wonderful opportunity to not only connect to the lake, but also the diversity of ecosystem that exists out there. So we also have opportunity to connect to the wetlands that are just north of the site, and then to the forest that's to the west, and trying to find a way that our building can do all that. And lastly, and maybe almost most importantly, is the wind. We know that's a big deal here, and also the rain. And so we actually worked through in all of these schemes ways that we could address both the really strong northern winds that happen in summertime when everybody wants to be outside, but then also provide cover in the winter for all the weather that's predominantly coming in from the south and southwest. Oh, mine. You're waiting for me and I'm waiting for you. Okay. The architecture itself, we're looking at the shape of the building and looking for ways to clues within the history of this place and the climate for what this building can be, so that it really truly belongs to here in a way that other architecture has. And we're actually looking for commonalities across all time of people building here, from the earliest indigenous cultures that made roof forms that were all about kind of protecting and shedding water away, and all the way up through the kind of mill structures and the kind of dock structures and the buildings there. The thing that is consistent, regardless of what sort of your cultural background or history is, architecture that's built for a purpose in this region is all about protecting you and sheltering you from rain and wet. And what's interesting to us about that is that with a library, if we do that, we also want to make sure that we're bringing in lots of light, which those buildings don't typically do. And so that's the kind of interesting design challenge that we set for ourselves, is how to do both, create shelter and light. So I'm just going to show you some other just precedent images of other projects around the world that we brought to kind of thinking about how to do that. This is an image that just shows how building the form of a building and a really broad kind of sheltering roof could also help to marry with the landscape. And so the idea that this building could literally feel like it is part of the park was one of the things that we were hoping to achieve through its overall form. And also just thinking about the landscape itself, that we can actually just think about how we use berms and shaping the earth in a way that not only does the building reference the land, but the land can kind of come up and meet the building so that they can feel like they're one together. And these are just some of the buildings that we've done in other parts of Oregon that all are informed by that roof form that is specific to their climate and locale. And really thinking about how those roof forms can echo and complement nature and refer to the forms that we see there. And so we're thinking about how this building sits in your site that way as well, where they work together. And then how those roof forms actually create the kind of spaces that you'll have inside your library. And just from the comments that we were getting about wanting this to be really warm and cozy and welcoming, we're really looking at roof forms that can help either through their materiality, whether it's a wood structure, even for the building, which could actually tie to local industry in a really strong way, but also bring a real warmth. And then also if we do create these kind of sheltering roof forms, thinking about the space that we're making on the inside when we make that roof form, that can also be really sheltering and embracing. And then lastly, thinking kind of about indoor-outdoor connection. How can this library really feel like it's welcoming you in from the park and then inviting you to kind of go back out and explore it with really strong connections to nature, whether that's just through really great big windows that frame views up into the tree canopy, or creating moments in the upper right where the building actually frames little distinct special views that make you sort of more aware of your natural surroundings, maybe more so than you were before. And even thinking about in the bottom right, big doors that could open up and invite you out onto a terrace or out into a public plaza. Okay. So we're going to show you 3 different options for the building today. And you're seeing all of the different plans here. The way they're organized on this slide is on the left. The top images are the 2nd floor. So that's at the top of the little hill. And then level 1 down below it is showing the level down at the lake. And so they're all 2-story options that way. Option A and option B, and then an option we're calling B2 because it's similar to B, but has program distributed in a very different way. So what I'm going to do, it's going to take a little bit of time to go through the first one, and then we'll go through the other ones more quickly once I help everyone get oriented to what they're looking at. So again, on the left, it says level 01. That means it's at the lower level, and the lower level is at the lake level. It's a couple of feet above the lake so that we don't get the lake coming into the building. And the dark hatched area at the top is kind of a wet, it's not a designated wetland, but it is pretty wet. In that position. That's because it's at the same elevation as the lake in that position. And then on the right is the 2nd floor, which is up at the ridge level. So as you're arriving and you're driving in, that's what you see first before you go down the hill to the parking lot. In both of these, we're proposing, everything you see today, we're proposing new parking both at the lower level and at the upper level, so that people have the ability to go and park at either level and enter the building. And we're providing handicap spaces at both levels that way. You don't have to take an elevator to get to any part of this building. Once you're inside, you probably would, and it will have an elevator for sure. So kind of walking through it, we'll start at the ground level. So you will have arrived at parking. That's all the parking there that is already there. And you'll drive past that parking and into the library parking. And we thought, that works out really well because it means that people that are coming for the park will already kind of come and park probably. And then you continue on to go to the library parking versus the other way around where you might stop at the first spot you get to. You'll enter where that pink arrow is. The yellow on these plans indicates entry space and arrival and lobby, if you will. And so you'll notice that we have yellow on both levels and they're connected to one another. So when you walk in to the yellow area here on your left, you'll see a stairway right away that's very large and wide that'll bring you right up to the second level. And you're seeing all the way through that yellow space back out to the woods and the wetlands. So right away when you walk in, you're seeing nature as part of the experience. At this lower level, the way the library program that we have down here includes the community room, which will be able to be dividable in half so that you can have two smaller ones or one larger one. And its position, and behind it, there's a rectangle in there that represents support space for that. So a kitchen, storage for furniture, things like that. And what's great about that orientation to the yellow entrance area is that you can have really big doors that all open up so that you can have an event like this, like what we're doing today, in a way that you could have free flow of people just kind of coming in and being able to go into that community room. Then that is supported also at this floor with restrooms. We've located the media and collab space of the library here at this level, as well as some other smaller meeting spaces. So overall, this design puts the majority of the meeting spaces all at the ground floor. And what you'll see is that means that the whole second floor can be all the rest of the library, children's, adults, teens, and those other areas. Also at the ground level, I'll note is our emergency dispatch center. So the 911 center would be down at that level. And we're working hard with that white arrow to indicate that there's a separate entrance for that space. We want to create some kind of separation and division in people's minds so it's clear to them that when they're arriving to the library, it's the library and they're not getting confused about, are they going into the dispatch center also? On the upper level, if you have taken the stairs up from the lower level, you'll arrive at the upper lobby. And the pink arrow there indicates the entrance at that level. And so here you're seeing that we've created a kind of an entrance that's at the corner. And so when you're arriving in parking, you'll really be able to see that entrance. Once you come in, that entry really divides the library into the children's to your right and adults to your left. So they're separate spaces and you don't have to go through one to get to the other. And then we put teens off of the adult space. Teens like to be associated with adults more than with little kids. And then also at this level are staff spaces. There are also staff spaces down below. And we've been working with Sammy, the director of the current library, to help understand how she would like to have her staff split between those two levels. One of the really important distinctions between the three schemes we'll show you today are the outdoor spaces. So this one actually proposed an outdoor porch that would be off of the east and north faces of the building so that they could take advantage of the views out to the lake. That's really a positive. The downside is that it's pretty windy in the summer. So in addition to that outdoor porch, the scheme also has, Nick, if you could point to the white kind of area at the end there, that's actually an extension of that porch that's a lot wider, wraps around the east side of the building more so that you get more sun on that part, but still might be exposed to north wind. And with that, I think, Nick, why don't we, so we've actually built some three-dimensional models of these that look way more finished than they are. So we need a caveat here that this is just to help everyone kind of get a sense of how the different spaces relate to one another. Pay no attention to the furniture and the lack of guardrails and things like that you'll see in here. So, okay, so this is a view of that library, and we've started to play with how the roof could be shaped in a way that connects both to those kind of historic kind of gable forms that are consistent across all of the kind of indigenous architecture and later kind of architecture of the area. And also get it to feel like it's kind of part of that landform. This is showing the parking lot in front where you would arrive. There's a kind of an entry plaza that then brings you up to the front doors at the lower level. And you can see we're starting to make some little stairs in there that can go, you can go up outside or you can go in the building and go up to the next level. The stairs indoors and out relate to one another. And then hopefully you don't get any vertigo, but we'll start kind of flying around the model a little bit. So the idea was that as you arrive, you can see all the way through the building, as I mentioned, back out to the wetlands. You can see the big site stair kind of going up the hill, and then that could align with a stair on the inside that would be taking you from level 1 up to the second level. Here at the corner, you can see the second level entrance. So even if you arrive at one or the other, you can just pretty easily go between the two. The idea was here by entering on the corner, you could also see all the way through out to the trees and the landscape. Kind of invites you in. And then also if you're arriving at the upper parking, then you could park and then you could step out onto this sidewalk and plaza, and that would bring you to the front door as well. And that would also provide service access for the librarians at the second level. And then we've developed the majority of the outdoor spaces here facing out toward the lake, with down below the community room that could open on 2 sides with glass, and in particular open up to this plaza that would really be where the main trail heads off along the lake out to the park. That would be right along the edge of that. You can imagine that having a fire pit, things like that out there. So you could have events that would be, so if you have an event in the community room, you could have the support of the kitchen and you could have outdoor functions there. And then an upper patio, there you can see that porch kind of wrapping around the corner. Again, we will have guardrails for sure. That's the kids area that you're seeing for program space that could open up there. And with a roof form like this, it's really wonderful. We could start to shape it where you could make more intimate, kind of smaller scale spaces for kids, and then make it open up and get taller for adults. Yep. So coming in, you'd be able to see right into that community room. We could have a large operable kind of glass wall or something that could open that up, and it would kind of expand that view from that main lower level. And then kind of if you went up the stairs, this is where you would arrive. And looking off to your left would be the adults, off to your right would be the kids. You'd have that porch on the outside facing the lake that could have a bunch of Adirondack chairs and things like that out there where you could take a book. And then this is down in the adult area, sort of looking back the other direction. And I don't know, Nick, if you spin around, that area of rooms on your right is the services and some meeting space. And then the idea was that we could start to shape the roof to open up the views from the adult wing back and orient it back toward into the forest in a really strong way. Okay. So Nick, with that, why don't we hop back to the presentation? And we have all of these up as boards here for a conversation after we run through these. So option B, I'm going to go much quicker now that you're a little bit oriented. Option B takes this idea of saying, what if we bring the children's area down to the ground level and have the adults at the upper level, both to provide that kind of easy kind of acoustic separation that we will have regardless. But it also was an idea to kind of enliven the ground floor with some of the kind of programming that the children would bring to it, whereas the other one just had meeting space down below. In talking to Sammy, she assures us that all the meeting space will be very heavily used and that will be very active. So we're not too concerned about that, but this was an option that we wanted to have discussed. So on the lower level, you would have children in the northeast corner, the community room on the same level over there to the left, and the same entry and relationship to the emergency dispatch center. And you could take the stairs up from there up to the upper level. And here you can see that the entry now, instead of being on the corner, is more in the middle. of the library. And so you'd arrive at that second level where that would be the entrance more in the middle of the library, and adults would be the entire floor along with teens. And so children down below and adults and teens up above. And what this does is it creates an area to the east for an outdoor terrace and roofscape that would open up that way. And we'll show you kind of what that looks like. Great. So this is more of a T-shaped building rather than maybe a C-shaped building. And you can see here that we still have a plaza and the parking at the lower level, very similar to the previous scheme. The big difference being how the outdoor space is shaped at the upper level. You can see the upper level plaza there that's off of the off the adult level. So the kids down below could have their own space off to the north or here to the east, like at grade, like at ground level. And that terrace would really serve just the adults and teens at the second level. And here we're actually using the roof shape to help that outdoor space feel like it's really opening up to the lake. But because of the depth of that space, it would still get really good sun. That said, we've actually, since our last kind of development of this with the steering committee, we've realized that we would want to still provide some screening for that outdoor space for north winds in the summertime to make it really habitable and more heavily used. So if you arrive at the upper level now, instead of entering on the corner, you'll enter in the middle of the building. Nick's changing the time of day for us, make it sunny. And so this would be the entry there in the middle. These will be meeting space, some teen spaces, stacks, staff spaces. And so you can go in, maybe restrooms off to the left, and you right away could be presented both with the visual connection down to the children's area right away when you walk in, so you know that's there, and the direct visual connection out to the lake across this terrace that would be inviting you to maybe go out and read a book in the sun. And then looking off to your left, that's the adult area, not quite as long and skinny as in the previous scheme, because we don't have as much, the whole level now is adult rather than having to share it also with children. And there's the view kind of looking northeast out to the lake. And then this is looking back from the adult space, that would occupy that whole upper level of the library. And down below, this would be the children's area. You can imagine outdoor space that could be immediately adjacent that the kids could go out to. And also the meeting room has that access as well. So it's sort of a shared plaza. It's on the north side though. And that's partly a product of wanting, to positioning the building between parking and then that space. Okay. And then the last option here, which is B2, pulls the children back up. So this is similar to the first scheme that we showed you, first option, where we had adults and children on the same level. So almost all, really all those library functions are at that upper level. It has entry in the middle again, like the one we just looked at. And it has that same kind of access out to green roof terrace off to the east, overlooking the lake. Oh, no problem. And at the ground level, what we've done to really respond to the climate and weather and wanting to get, people wanting to gather on the south side of the building, what we've done is reconfigured the parking so that the parking runs more or less how it does now in this area and stays closer over by the lake. And what that does is it enables us to get more space in front of the building for arrival and a kind of public plaza. And so in this scheme, we actually looked at an option to flip the community room over so that it could open up to the south and to that space where everyone's arriving, with the idea that that's maybe arguably a better outdoor space because it's south facing and the building itself is protecting you from the north winds. The rest of the building, you can see kind of, I'll start at the bottom, Nick, and work my way up. There's the emergency dispatch center all the way on that end. Followed up by support spaces and then the staff spaces, which means that and then the stair that would take you to the upper level. And then that upper level, which we just described, teens are off of adults. There are bathrooms available right away when you walk in. There are some maybe smaller meeting spaces up at that, like for 2 or 4 people in a meeting space. And then the children are there kind of on the south end. So like as you're arriving, we're picturing that as being a very vibrant, active space. So as you're parking up there, you're seeing kids and seeing the vitality of that. And the north kind of quieter part of the building is reserved for the adult space. And then this is just a 3-dimensional view of that. We're starting to include some kind of a shelter and screen on the north side of that open courtyard that could help shield from wind. But here you're seeing by rotating that parking out of the way, you're creating that really great opportunity for outdoor space on the south side, which this is just a placeholder. We'll develop all this with Charlie. The meeting room could actually open right out onto that space. And our idea and aspiration there would be to actually create more of a kind of entry courtyard and an entry room and space that would feel like you could have an event there. So to separate it a little bit from parking so that you don't feel like you're out in a parking lot when you're in that space. And then we're also suggesting that the roof form itself could really reach out in a very really dramatic way to provide cover for people walking from the parking lot to the front door. So that when it's raining, you have shelter in that way. Very similar to the other one, you'd have entry in the middle. You could have kids here now at the upper level, really helping to activate that and form your kind of first impressions of the library when you arrive at this level. There can be staff entrance and service available at this upper level as well. And again, just being able to move in, orient yourself, see the community room down below, see that connection out to that outdoor space. Here you're starting to see that suggestion on the left of some kind of a windscreen that would also allow you to have, when you're sitting in the right spot, you also kind of still get views kind of back out to the woods through a series of some kind of louvers. And you're seeing the adults kind of down at the far end, and then we're kind of down in the kids area here. Great. Okay, and with that, Nick, maybe we could hop back to the presentation. And I'm going to hand it over to Charlie to talk a little bit more about the landscape and how that can marry to any of these options.
Hi, folks. David did a really nice job explaining and Carrie explaining the site issues, but just cannot reinforce the importance of an acknowledgement of the site's ability to acknowledge the weather. So without endeavoring to say it for a fourth time, we're thinking about that very much, right? And so as we think about where these building components get located and how they relate back to the site and the landscape, we're thinking about this diverse program that we have. And there's been a lot of conversation about library specific tasks and parks specific programs, and then how those two come together. And maybe there's even this third quality, which is the notion that the library is more. It serves a role of community center and of sorts, with after school programs and cultural interaction. And it's just a really wonderful way for us to think about this, the trifecta of everything coming together. A couple elements that were brought forward at our last public meeting were the acknowledgement of an opportunity, not just for a native plant garden or ecology walk into the park, but something that could go to the next level and have a Native American interpretive walk, where the ability to have the plants of the forest called out with not just their English and Native American, or English and Latin names, but also their Native American names. So there's a whole spectrum of opportunities we're looking at. As you go into the site, if we started in the upper left-hand corner, that's a view at the upper level, if you were looking from the entry drive towards the entrance, so towards that top entry. And then if you go to the next one over the top in the middle, that's turning back and looking towards the onion, as Carrie said. So to give you an idea that you're starting to get immersed a little bit more in the forest. We've also envisioned that because we're establishing a finished floor elevation for the building that is coincident with the grades at that height, we're going to endeavor to preserve trees. So the diagrams show a complete parking lot from one end to the next. But if we're able to save trees by articulating the stalls and capturing trees, we're going to do that. And then the final image, that's that view on site that David was talking about when you're in the adult reading room and you're looking out into the forest. That's what we can imagine. On the lower level, as you dip down the current drive that takes you to the boat launch and the lower parking, you might have noticed in the diagrams, the diagrams currently don't follow the exact path that's there today. They spin around and they go on what would be considered the uphill side of the restroom. And the reason that that's important is we're doing that to be able to access the parking in a way that does not influence the front door in a negative way. And that's one option. That's an exploratory view that we're looking at. And as you move from left to right, that's the far right is the space where the new drive would slide between the restroom and those existing trees. And then we're going to just walk through the sites. So we go down to the lake level for the building A. I just want to point out a couple things about those wetlands. Excuse me. The acknowledgement of building up to the edge, we think that's quite wonderful from the interactiveness of it, and the fact that anything that we impact the project will restore. And so there's this nuanced dance about how close to the edge of the wetland do we go and how far do we pull back. In this particular case, because the parking lot slips between the existing restroom and the building, we're pretty much set at the defined point. You'll also notice a crosshatch right there where it says 18 parking spaces. Excuse me, that's right in the middle of the lawn right now. So even though it's identified as a designated wetland, it really is a wet, what we would all call the wet spot in the lawn versus the wetland. And so that will get rationalized a little bit more. And I think you can probably have quite a few of those wetland lawns here in Coos Bay. If we go to the upper right corner and work our way through the acknowledgement of not just restoring that wetland, but bringing it right up to the edge. So having that landscape come right up, that native landscape come right up to the edge of the building, we think is a wonderful opportunity. And experientially, you can imagine looking out and almost being able to touch the forest and the wetlands through the glass. The plaza, that orange speckled space, is an opportunity to create that extension off of the community room. And that it's so diagrammatic at this point. We have the ability to make that really an interesting and dynamic space that's getting that morning light. And speaking of morning light, we often refer to something as outdoor comfort. If we can keep you dry and we can put you in the sun, then we're happy. Today's a good example. This morning it was crisp and clear, but it was probably too cold unless you got into the sun. And just those extra 10 feet to walk out of the shadow into the sun was worth it. This is the place you're going to come in the morning to have a cup of coffee or connect with a friend. As we work our way around, we've talked about the idea of an outdoor space for kids and kind of get the wiggles out, programmed space that supports after school uses, maybe has some of that storage access that David was noting. And then this one does require a little bit of the realignment of the trail. There's been a lot of positive conversations about our interactions with emergency response. And what we've done is we went ahead and laid in what one of an emergency response tent might look like. And without trying to plan the whole system, the idea of having those generator connections, having those building tent interfaces conceived early on will make it that much better in the future. We also have that boat launch and kayak launch, which we envisioned will stay in its current location. It's not part of the library project, but what we are also conceiving is that to have that being accessible, kayak and boat launch, there will be some type of floating device. And that's a separate and parallel effort, but just in case anyone was curious. You also see the dashed line of maneuvering a trailer. So we're acknowledging that. So whichever parking lot solution is selected, for those of us that try and maneuver trailers, we give enough room. And then there was also this idea of, do we need more parking? How much parking do we use? So the low-hanging fruit is also that is an option, would be extending the parking at that lower level for park users, for library events, what have you. And then a tertiary option is that entry drive as you come in along the west side of the Onion. It's an extra wide aisle right now. It's a little over 30 feet. And so it could support a line of parallel parking on the exit route if that was so desired, somewhere between 12 and 16 spaces. We're not counting that today, but it is. I just wanted to let you know that that's something that's out there. So if we go to the upper level here, I guess I did the same thing David did. I was waiting for Nick to advance this. If we go to the upper level, we think a little bit about how can we acknowledge the forest. So we talked about a forest gathering space. That's maybe an informal area that allows reading groups to come out, or again, those after school activities. We're under the canopy of the trees. There's a little bit of protection, but at the same time, we're always in the shade there. So it has limited programmatic use unless the weather is fine. And then this is the area we know that we're going to impact the forest when we build. And so how do we restore it back? That native plant garden that is going to be our palette that we're going to wrap the site with, the ferns and the huckleberry, the salal, whole plethora of opportunities. We're going to bring a loading zone that's close to the building, convenient for those book drop off and movement to other sites. And then also the notion that maybe the parks explore the idea of bringing in a kiosk, a place where not just to have signage, but maybe a little protection as you're orienting and going off to the next trail stop. So that's option A. If we move to option B, and B and B2 are not dramatically different. We can, thank you. If we go to, so we go to B, that it's the same basic idea, except the children's court has really taken over most of that space on the lower level. It's because we're moving up and we have those roof terrace opportunities. We also know that there's going to be stormwater gardens throughout the project, regardless of what option we select. And we're excited about some of these roof forms dipping down, and you can imagine the water cascading or rocketing off the roof during an event. We often playfully refer to this, when you come here to see what the rain is doing, not to get out of the rain, because it could be quite enjoyable, quite artful. So basically it's the same in this organization on the lower level. Maybe a difference is because the building has been narrowed up. There's a little bit more room for a sunny seating area on the south side adjacent to that entry court. Just a little bit more room as we move through there. And we go to the upper level. The big difference here is it's a centrally focused entrance, and but the building does lay on the site very similarly. So we have similar loading, similar parking, and covered entry with that forest gathering or seating area. The difference with this one is that there is a 750 square foot gathering space on the outside of the adult reading room and lobby, and that affords some pretty marvelous views. And then if we move to option B2, this is the version that from a site perspective really shakes things up, and we think provides some great advantages to from a site perspective. So the parking as laid out is what you see today if you were to visit the site, or pretty much what you see today. And as we work our way around the site, that idea of still having site activities on that east side, still being able to embrace that, whether it's the community room rolling out onto that space or rolling out to that flexible event plaza. And I think that that's maybe a little highfalutin, not so much a plaza as it is a garden or flexible court space, really protected well from those northerly winds and getting that southern sun. We've all been against a south-facing wall that has heated up, and know how wonderful that can be. Again, inclusion of stormwater, plenty of room for the emergency response activities, and still a convenient set of movements to allow the boat launch to work. And this one would even allow the, with a sacrifice a little bit to that flexible court, would allow the entry drive down to these 2 parking spaces to function in the same way. So it would clip off the corner of the red event space in the diagram here. And then if we lift ourselves to the upper event or upper level, it's very similar to what we've all been talking about, with the exception that we're adding a set of stairs that wrap down around the south side. And because we have moved a little bit closer here, we're not proposing necessarily an outdoor gathering area in the forest, but that could be an alternative in any of these options. So that's how we envision the site plan and the different program elements fitting. There's a myriad of refinements, and we're excited to speak with you in a few minutes about how that might all come together. And welcome your questions and comments.
I think from there we wanted to open up to Q&A if anyone wanted to ask any out in the open into the microphone, so we can have it on Zoom, or we can just go into discussion at the boards if that's preferred.
You mentioned that there was a drop-off, but I did not see how materials could be returned. Or differently abled citizens have been very concerned there's not a library in the county where they can just drive up and be covered from the rain and not have to get out of their vehicle and drop off return materials. Is that designed that way on the site, and it's just not visible because of where we are in the drawings right now?
Yeah, I'd say the latter of what you just mentioned. I think we're definitely going to be thinking about that. We certainly have the kind of walk-up, drop-off figured out, but we still need to think about the drive-up and what possibility is there. We'll be working with Sammy and her folks to understand, it could be, doing something out kind of in the site that is along a drive aisle, for example. We're definitely, that's next level for sure. Thank you for reminding us of that. That's good.
I'm concerned about, we've had so much trouble with our current flat roof. It's just kind of a problem waiting to happen, and I'm concerned that the upper terrace area that you've talked about might become such a source. I mean, it's a wonderful idea, but I just wonder how practical and long-term it can be.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. What I think we have a couple different ways of addressing that. I think we have gotten some good feedback. It seems like something pretty exciting to provide for patrons if we're able to. And so we have quite a bit of roofing has come quite a ways since your library was built, and those systems have been developed significantly. There are other libraries that we could refer you to that have done this and their systems that are using kind of state-of-the-art systems that have really long lives. Technically, the way they're made, you have a fully kind of waterproof membrane that is below finished paving goes, and then the finished paving is actually set up in a way that it can be removed if you need to get access to any part of it. And that system is actually longer lived than systems that are just kind of exposed to the weather, because they already have that cover and they're protected from people dropping stuff on it, or limbs falling or whatever. Anyway, I think we will definitely be doing our due diligence in terms of specifying the kind of systems that we'll use here that have proven experience of having successfully been used this way over a long periods of time. Yep.
My name is Charlotte Kepke, and I'm basically here to represent two different groups. I realize that everybody has to be someplace, and I'm here to represent the homeless people, 165 parking places for old beat-up motor homes and that sort of thing. Be a wonderful thing for this community, and we'll invite all of our friends to participate. We also like the idea of covered patios and places to be outside and clean restrooms and all these wonderful things that the homeless people are entitled to have and need a place to go. And ladies and gentlemen, this will be just like North Bend. They're fighting the homeless people behind their community center. So I'm here to represent those homeless people. I'm also here to represent our downtown merchants. Like Fred Meyer's and Safeway and Weimar and things like that, that were open and served us in the very early days of this pandemic. And we could go in and look at books, we could buy books, our neighbors and our friends were putting their life on the line. And now the city is wanting to put this library right up next to Walmart. 300,000 people, the mayor says, will be traipsing back and forth right in front of Walmart. I'm here to represent the downtown area. I think the library needs to be downtown. Like the Coos County Museum is on the waterfront. Now you think those exhibits are not going to get wet with the tsunami? I'm here to tell you they're going to get wet. The New Bay community was given building permits. I'm sure that our downtown needs to have the library downtown. How you get it there, I'm not sure, but I'm here to represent those merchants that have served me well, far better than the library. And let me tell you, the library's statistics that was in the paper shows that the average person takes out less than 1.5 items a year's time. Now, the mayor says there's 300,000. I called the Coos County Library District, and I looked at their auditor's report. The auditor's report does not say how many people use the library, but the auditor's report does say this number is the number to call. I called that number, and she said that what I really needed to do was ask for a public records request, which I'm going to put in while I'm here today, and ask the mayor where he got the figure for 300,000 people to use the library. That's about all I've got to say on this situation.
Thank you.
Well, since I'm the mayor, and I make that comment, it's 300,000 visits, not 300,000 people. And where I got that information is from our librarian, Sammy, if you want to address this issue and how you came to that. But I imagine there's some kind of record keeping that how many people come and go on each visit or how many visits throughout the year.
Yes, we keep track of both visits within the library, programming, people who use our meeting rooms, and other activities that we have going on at the library. So we do track those numbers.
And she referenced the homeless. We have a camping ordinance that's time, place, and manner. And our chief of police isn't here at the moment, but we have another representative that can explain to you that they will not be able to park out there. In fact, they can't even access that park now after sunset. And so no one can be out there in any park after sunset. We have a 911 center to make sure that it's even more safe than it is now.
And the library has security too. The library has security.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. With that, we're gonna go to Q&A at the boards. There's a bunch of little stickers and name tags that hopefully you filled out and signed in. We welcome you to put post-its of any comments you want to add to the boards. There's hearts if you have some very strong opinions about things. We welcome you to put hearts on any photos, pictures, words, and then dots if there's something that you're like, maybe I do feel strongly about this, but you're not as like obsessed with a heart.